That's how I spend most of my day.
Homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, and extreme to the bone!
What happened to Sabu? Never got the accolades, never got the money he deserved, and almost killed himself for every promoter he worked for.
You want a match? It's gonna be your last one.
I don't know. There's no story. No planned out, premeditated story that I know of. Unless, if I was to maybe die tomorrow, then that'd be a good story.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another great edition of my Grue Rume Show. For the Grue Rume Show today, I got a very awesome guest, and he's a filmmaker, and his name is Joe Clarke. And we're going to talk to him about his latest film, a documentary about one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, hardcore icon, Sabu. I am Rocco Cross. I am the host at Stutters. I am the host of the Grue Rume Show. And my interview with Joe will be coming up very soon. This is my Grue Rume, and as always, my Grue Rumes. Welcome to my nightmare. So stay. All right, buddy. Welcome to Grue, and thank you so much for being my guest today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. How's everything going?
It's going pretty good. Pretty good. It's a pretty busy day at work today, so yeah, it makes the time go by faster, right?
That's the right attitude to have.
And before we talk about the film, I just want to start out asking you, what drew you to that world? Like, why did you want to start making films?
I've been making movies since I was 10 years old, and
Oh, wow.
I've been doing this for a really long time. I grew up, the first few years of my life, I was in Wisconsin, and I always think of 1998 as a very critical, formative year in my consumerism for pop culture. That's when the Attitude Era was in full effect,
Yes.
Stone Cold and The Rock, Mankind, all that. And I was huge into action movies, Jackie Chan, Rocky, Stallone. And so I feel like those were like those big pillars of influence in my life. And I became obsessed with wrestling as I was a wrestling fan even before that. So I've been a mark pretty much my whole life. And so, the marriage kind of made sense because I started making movies as a kid and then in my adult life. And I'd always wanted to make a really impactful wrestling documentary. I remember watching Beyond the Mat and Wrestling with
Oh my
Sheik as a
God,
kid.
yes.
And those had like a big impact on me, and they were influential for this film. And so I would like to believe that Sabu, the film, belongs in those tier of projects.
Oh man, I can't wait to see it. I was always a huge fan of his.
Yeah, it was I tell the story all the time. I bounced around the Midwest as a kid, and in junior high I was in Minnesota, and I remember being in the computer lab, and we were everyone was obviously doing their own thing, like ignoring the teacher or whatever. And I remember like downloading like super grainy videos of the stretcher match between RVD and Sabu, and it was probably like a dial-up modem, so I was like barely getting little clips and just being like blown away at the different spots I was seeing because it was just so much more extreme, no pun intended, than like the mainstream wrestling world.
Oh yeah.
Sabu made the perfect sense. I still think about him all the time. We had a wild ride filming this project. We met at very similar times, and so he was the perfect person to bring his story and the story of wrestling to life through this film.
Oh wow. And is that what drew drew you to him? Like what stood out the most is that he was different from everyone else. Like he was doing all these like crazy kind of matches and hardcore stuff, but he is also a high flyer too and a brawler. And like is that what stood out most?
When I look back on it, I feel like everything really came together perfectly. About almost about 8 years now, maybe a little bit longer. I produced a documentary with Rob Van Dam. And we had never met at that point, and I basically followed him on a stand-up comedy tour. The name of the movie is Headstrong, and right before the tour, he got a concussion, and
Ooh.
the film takes a pivot where it kind of follows his concussion syndrome or his symptoms, which was double vision at the time, and so
Mm.
it was a really strong project. And since then, we've become like really close, and we've always talked about different projects we could do. About a year and a half ago, I texted him. I said, "What if we did a documentary of Sabu?" And he said, "Yeah, I've thought about that. I would love that, but Sabu, because of his uniqueness, that's reflected outside of the ring." And so he was very, part of his gimmick was being very closed off,
Oh, definitely.
private, and so we both thought that it would be an amazing documentary regardless, but the logistics of getting him on board, that was challenging. But Rob was, they were like brothers,
Yeah.
so it just worked so in a way that we were able to connect. And it's always been my dream, I made Headstrong, but it was a different project and it was more of a collaboration with Rob. And I had a singular vision for making a wrestling documentary that would basically challenge people's perception of wrestling being real. Because
Okay.
as a kid, I was a huge fan. I had a bunch of other friends who were fans of wrestling. But then, the into junior high, high school, wrestling was like not cool at all to
Yeah,
a
yeah.
fan. And so, and a lot of that was the stigma of, what everyone thinks is wrestling's fake. And so, I feel like I had such respect for the industry and the people that were involved with it that I wanted to create a project that challenged that wrestling is fake. And because Sabu's commitment and sacrifice to the business and what he did for it, I knew that would be a perfect marriage as well to kind of show that wrestling is way more real than people give it credit for.
I mean, he definitely proved that wrestling isn't fake. All you have to do is look at his body and all the scars and the marks and the barbed wire cuts and yeah, like I,
And you
like
know,
being a wrestling fan, I hate when people say that.
I mean, that's the and that's the other thing too is I wanted to make a movie that wrestling fans could wear as a badge of honor and show their non-wrestling fans to give them more understanding that it wasn't just a black and white issue of what they thought it was, and to be proud to be a wrestling fan. And so that's
Hmm.
where I was coming from to make this.
Nice. And you mentioned the match you saw with him and Rob Van Dam. Was that like the first time you ever watched one of his matches?
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, because back then there was no YouTube, there wasn't, the internet, so it was more difficult to get access to his matches. And so I just have
Mhm.
fleeting memories of just glimpses of seeing him on different clips. And I remember going to, FYE and seeing the ECW DVDs and
Yeah.
looking on the back and seeing like, oh, what's this barbed wire match with Terry Funk? And like,
Oh my God, I love
he
that
always had
match.
that underground vibe to him,
Hmm.
where you kind of had to seek it out a little bit. But you knew that on that outlier were incredible things that you weren't seeing in the mainstream.
Oh yeah. And did you ever get a chance to watch him wrestle live?
Yeah, so I don't know if you're familiar, but like the film follows his journey to his retirement match, his
Okay.
final match. And so, we spent a good year and a half together training, getting him ready for that match. And it was a spectacular spectacle in every sense of the word. So at age, he was 61 at that time, and he became the Sabu of 1995. Like it was insane.
Oh yeah, look, I watched that match, the barbed wire match with Joey, and I mean, of course, with his age and all the damage done to him, like he couldn't move like the way he used to, but he put on a hell of a match, and I wanted to know your thoughts on his last match, his final match.
So it's funny, like we had been filming for a few months, and I knew we were getting really good footage, and he was being very vulnerable and honest. He was probably the most honest person I've ever met. And so I knew that we were getting a genuine look into his life, both inside and outside of the ring. And we knew the destination would be his final match, and it's something that he had been wanting, and he wanted that
Mhm.
redemption, and he wanted to go out with a bang. And and we had this conversation later. I told him like I didn't tell him before, but I was very nervous for him for the last match because we've
Oh yeah,
seen
of
those
course.
wrestlers who Father Time catches up with him. I didn't want it to be cringeworthy. I didn't want him to be embarrassed. I didn't want it to be bad, you know. So I was really nervous for him, and I know he was nervous. And in fact, I was going so far as to I was consistently brainstorming different methods on how we could gimmick up the camera to like make him look better than it was,
Yeah.
whether it be shooting in slow motion or like some sort of, I even pitched the idea, like in the movie The Wrestler, it doesn't even show the final match. So I was like,
Yeah.
maybe we don't even show the final match, And so, there's so many twists and turns about that last match, but, the biggest twist was I wasn't anticipating it being the incredible match that it was. And so
Mhm.
seeing clips of it through the live broadcast, but the actual emotion that's captured through the film of up close and personal, the live broadcast doesn't do it justice, and that's why I'm excited for people to experience this film because you really, really see from the front row who Sabu was, and I remember the energy of that night, like everyone thinking like, "Oh, what's going to happen here?" And then him taking all of us into a time machine back to
Oh
the
my
time of Sabu's life, and so I think he hit a flow and like a height of artistry that's been rarely matched since, and I think it's one of the best last matches ever.
Definitely, definitely. Well, it definitely was a lot better than Flair's.
And that's what he wanted. He always referenced, he kept saying, like, I want to do last match, but I don't want to be like bad like Ric Flair's. And to be honest, and that's what I was saying before, is after the match, I talked to him on the phone and I was like, bro, I was nervous that it was going to be a little cringy and you blew everyone away and you got my respect for life. Not that he didn't have it before,
Yeah.
but he took it to another level where, and I've heard this, people say this multiple times, like, is this guy even human? Like, for him to do, I couldn't do 1/100th of what he did at age 61 that night right now without like ending up in a hospital. Like if I stubbed my toe on the sidewalk, I feel like I would be in more pain than he was.
And like going back and like watching like all his matches, all his classics, and the high flying, the hardcore. Do you have a match of his that's like your all time favorite one? Like mine's is actually his barbed wire match that you mentioned with Terry Funk. Like I absolutely love that match.
That's an amazing match. It's another great journey. Like, and I have a feeling too, like the same thing. Like we watch it now, we've all seen it 100 times on different platforms, DVD, YouTube, whatever it is. But in thinking of how I saw the last match live, I can't imagine what seeing that match live with the energy of the crowd in real time would have been like. I feel like it almost kind of has that Mankind, Undertaker, Hell in a Cell type aura to it, where there's just so much emotion because it's so real. And when you watch the match now, it's like, yeah, we know he survived this and that, but I bet you in the moment, people there were like, I don't know if this guy's gonna live or not. And so that's a favorite. Like I said, I grew up on the stretcher match. That's a personal favorite.
Yeah.
But I've also come to realize just through the process of, going through his career is that he was actually a really great technical and revolutionary wrestler in the early 90s, where it wasn't just all the tables and stuff. Like he was actually doing things I'd never seen before then. And so I'm really happy, since he's passed that he has had this legacy
Mhm.
renaissance where he finally is getting his flowers.
Definitely.
I wish
Definitely.
he got it beforehand, obviously, but I'm glad now that people are at least starting to really recognize him as a true legend, whereas before I feel like most of us were taking it for granted.
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really happy to see like more people are talking positive now about him.
For sure, and that's that's kind of the ironic, eerie theme to the movie is that he wanted to push himself for this last match, and so many people say throughout the film that he never really got his flowers. He never got his just due. He never got the big paydays. He never got those things that, given what his contribution were to the industry, what he was entitled to, and that that's sad that now he's getting it, but that's almost a poetic artist at play. Like I feel like that's a tale as old as time, and that's why it's so powerful and how the story is encapsulated through this.
Oh yeah, definitely for sure. And you mentioned how you got like Rob Van Dam on board for the film, and you've been close friends with him and worked with him. And how do you feel about like how that bond was with RVD and Sabu? Like, I mean, they were a tag team with Bill Alfonso as their manager. They feuded against each other, and just like they had like this like really strong bond. And one of the things that I love most, like with the whole era of art, Rob Van Dam and him, is that a Japanese wrestler that I absolutely love. We saw for the first time in America. It was when Hayabusa came and did that tag match against Rob Van Dam and Sabu. Like, that was amazing.
Totally, yeah. It was cool to see their friendship up close and personal, and that was the fun part about filming it is all three of us lived in Las Vegas, and so it was very casual how we would do the filming. It would be like I would be at Sabu's house, and Rob would just come on over, and they would hang out. They would go ride bikes and like go to a cool wrestling bar in town. So it was all very fluid and natural. It wasn't like this highly orchestrated production. It's very raw and authentic, and you really get
Mhm.
true insight into the friendship. I think one of my favorite scenes is there was just one night, it was just a few weeks before Sabu passed out. We just went over to Rob's house. We didn't really plan on anything. We just texted him and said, "Hey, we're gonna come over for a little bit and hang out." And literally, this scene is just the two of them hanging out. They smoke a joint. They go to Rob's gym. They work out, and like, it's awesome. It's just like a different perspective of that tag team chemistry, but in real life in 2025, just kind of
Yeah.
kicking it. And I was a fly on the wall, and with everything that's transpired, it just one more surreal layer to all of it. But yeah, they had a really, really close friendship, and even Rob and I, when we were in Michigan for his memorial service, like we were kind of just like going through our different text messages with Sabu, and on the drive,
Oh,
like Rob was just literally reading all of Sabu's texts from the last year and
wow.
seeing different things that he said that were really deep in a way that he thought that might have been foreshadowing of what was going on with him.
Oh, okay. Damn. And just like hanging out with Sabu and riding with him and making the film with him. And what was that experience like for you just to actually be like in his presence, listening to his stories.
Looking back, it was a completely surreal experience. It doesn't really feel real. It kind of feels like a myth in some ways because I was making the movie essentially. Rob was my partner on this, but mainly it was just me with my cell phone and some audio equipment and Sabu. So it was just the two of us. And so I kind of compare it to the movie Almost Famous, where the guy goes on the tour with the rock band. Like that's what it felt like. I felt like a 15-year-old and Sabu was like the rock star. And it was it was a surreal, wild experience, and it was larger than life. It was insane. It was crazy. Um, you definitely see I capture some moments that are pretty wild and out there with him that again just contributes to his larger than life persona where um it really is showed his in-ring chaos is reflective of his out-ring chaos, and to be able there and to have really open conversation with him. Like I said, he's probably the most honest person I've ever met in my life, to the point where I asked him one night, I was like, you tell the truth of how you see everything. Like, does that ever get you in trouble? And he said, "Oh yeah, all the time," you know. And we were able to have really cool conversations, and he was super open about everything. So as a wrestling fan, it was a dream because after he got comfortable with me and after a few months, I literally just like would think of just random questions and be like, "Hey, what was this situation with this guy? What happened there?" And he would just
Yeah.
like tell it like it was. So like it was
Wow.
awesome.
Damn, that's so amazing. And is there like anything you learned about him that you didn't know going into making the film?
I learned a lot from him and about him. Uh, you know, I learned that he was actually more sensitive than his in-ring persona. Like we all know the crazy spots, the tables, and like the death-defying moves and stuff, but when you really got to know him, he was kind of a sensitive soul in a lot of ways, and that was really interesting to get to know, and just as like his everyday um life was just super interesting. Like he could make everyday little things fascinating. And that was really the gift as a filmmaker, to be able to follow someone around to give you interesting and compelling and unique footage. He was the king of that. Like I remember one day, I would take him to the gym all the time. And we'd film stuff, and I remember one night he was like, "Okay, after the gym, I'm gonna go eat something." And I was like, "Okay, like." Who knows, I'm gonna grab some footage of him eating, and we went back to his place, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, but he makes a shake, and I'm not gonna spoil what he puts in the
Okay.
shake, but it's the most Sabu thing I've ever seen in my life, and that's what I quickly realized was everything that started happening. I was like, this is the most Sabu way to do this is the most Sabu way to do this. Like, even through to the end of his life, after the end of his life, like when Rob asked me certain questions like, "Hey, what was going on this time?" I'm like, this was the most Sabu thing, like everything was
Definitely.
perfectly authentic to who he was.
Nice, nice. And of course, you can't mention him without mentioning one of the people that helped him, that trained him, the original Sheik. And Sheik was wild in his day.
Yeah, I didn't know much about him going into the film. I knew the connection, obviously, and I knew of like some of the mythology, but what I didn't know, and this goes back to what you asked, what I found out about him is like they pretty much Sabu pretty much became the original Sheik. Like they were very, 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 very similar, and to the point where our last phone call out that we had. Sabu told me that he wanted to change his name to the Sheik Sabu. And so he
Oh,
mimicked, and I don't want to say mimic because he created his own path. He was inspired by the original Sheik, and I didn't know how similar their paths were, but it's really cool. Rob says something that I agree with is that, the original Sheik was actually he was huge back in the day, and I
oh yeah.
associate because of my generation as Sabu as this like larger than life figure. But Sabu was able to get out of the Sheik's shadow by doing his own path, even though they both had their own unique thing and they both created their own intense fan bases.
Oh man. And this has nothing to do with the movie. I always like to ask a couple like horror questions, and I'm a horror fan. This is Halloween season, so is there anything coming up for you? Like, do you do Halloween parties, costumes, go to any haunts? Like, how's your Halloween season?
I would say the closest thing is I saw the movie Weapons over the
Yes.
summer, which that was an amazing horror movie. I love that movie. So, if you're looking for a scary movie, this Halloween, I highly recommend it. I love that movie.
Okay, okay. Do you ever do like the haunted houses and hay rides or anything like that for the season?
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, like I said. Did the hayride in Iowa and did haunted houses. I love the what do you call it? Universal Studios. They have
Oh, the
the
Halloween Horror Nights.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those that was probably my favorite experience with haunted houses.
Nice, nice. I still have to try that yet. I might actually do it this season. Like I'm really considering going to California and seeing it.
It's really fun. It's cool. They do different themes every year. There's like 9 or 10 different ones, all unique, and yeah, it's fun.
Nice, nice. And what about like what kind of music do you like? What's on your playlist?
I have a very eclectic mix. I love everything from pop music, classical music, movie scores, hip hop. I feel like my music playlist is defined by the variety and the randomness of all of it.
Okay. And what do you think would be your go-to karaoke song if you were going to do one?
I love 90s pop songs where you can kind of just shout the chorus and it doesn't really
Definitely.
depend
Definitely.
on having a good voice, but more of engagement with the audience and kind of creating energy in the room. So, your Blink 182s or Third Eye Blind, anything you can yell with the crowd is fun.
And the last thing I'll ask you is where could fans follow you and watch the amazing film that's about to come out?
Yeah, you can follow us at my handle is Joe Clarke World. Clarke has an E. You can also follow us at Back Row Studios. Sabu releases September 15th on Kinema. That's cinema with a K. It's a really cool platform where you just watch it on any device. You can go online and pre-order it. And yeah, it's a sweet setup because you can also host your own screenings from anywhere around the world, and it's basically like a new age theatrical way to watch independent films. So check it out. I feel like, in today's streaming world, everything is so in demand that I feel that the buzz is kind of creating an event feel for this movie. And I think that people are going to be very surprised and have their expectations turned upside down of what the movie is. So I'm excited for audiences to learn more about it through the experience.
Nice. Well, it was very nice meeting you. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
Awesome, Rocco. I appreciate that. This was so much fun, and yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Definitely, bud. Well, have an amazing day.
Thank you so much. Take care. Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.